So this tutorial is about arrays and looping. So you are going to learn how to create an array. You're going to learn how to change the data in an array, and then I'm going to show you a couple of ways of looping. If you look at some of the previous tutorials, I talked about while loops, and that is one way of looping, but there are many ways you could solve computer programming problems, and so it's important to know what tools you have in your toolbox. And so a quick intro. So we're going to look at things like this again. This example comes from W3C Schools. So you click on that. The worksheets are in the link in the playlist, and I'll put it in the link below if you can't find that playlist. But if you find the playlist for all these tutorial sets, you'll see the worksheets that will lead to this folder with all these worksheets in. So yeah, we're going to look at creating arrays, like an array of strings. We're going to look at creating an array of numbers, and then we're going to look at a few different ways to loop around them. So there's while loop, there's for loop, and there's also a for each loop. And then at the end, there are some exercises here to help you practice. So, for example, you're going to have to have an array of numbers, and you're going to have to find the minimum and the maximum. So to get started, again, we create a replit, a C# replit, and I'm going to call it arrays and loops. And I'm going to create this inside of my folder, so keep your work nice and neatly organized. And then I'm going to delete this line. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an array of grades. So I'm going to call it, they're going to be integers, they're going to be whole numbers. So I write the type int, and then I write square bracket to say it's an array. And then I'm going to have to write the name of my array, and then I'm going to assign it values. So, and the values that I'm going to assign it, I have to put within these squiggly brackets. That's just how you have to do things in C# when you want to initialize an array. And I'm going to put grades like 50, 60, 70, 100, 110. And these are going to be percentages. You'll see why in a minute. The first way I could loop around, a quick recap, I could use a for loop. Well, how do I loop around? Well, okay, before I get to that point, when you create an array, your array, like each element in your array, like 50, 60, 70, 100, and 110, has different indexes. So for example, this element here, 50, is at index 0. That element is at index 1, element 2, 3, and 4, and so on. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements in my array, but the last index is 4 because the first index is always at 0. So maybe make a note of that. Indexes in an array start at 0. They start at 0, e.g. 50 is at index 0, but 110 is at index 4. Now this comes in handy, very important to understand this, a bit later on when you're trying to loop through arrays and maybe you try to go to an index that doesn't exist. So if I wanted to console.writeLine element 50, so I want to print this to the screen, I could write the name of the array, grades, and then I'm going to write in square brackets the index. So if I do that, it will print out 50. Now it's got an error here. What's that? What's wrong with that? I think that could be a replit problem. So if I run that now, I'm going to see printed to the console the first grade 50. Maybe while this is loading, how can I print out, say, the third element? Which index would I have to go to? So perhaps pause the video and see if you can do that and print that to the screen. So to give you the answer to that, console.writeLine, and I'm going to say grades. If I want to print out the third index, then I have to go 0, 1, 2. So it's index 2. So run that again. I'll see 50 printed out, and then I'll see the second element, which is 0, 1, 2, 70. In the same way, I can print, there we go. In the same way I can print an element of an array, I can also change what's in the array. So say I wanted to change this grade here. It's very much like how you change the value inside of a variable. So if you created a variable called age, you initialize it. If you want to change what's inside of that variable, you just write age equals whatever. Well, the same thing I can do with arrays. So I can say element at 0 equals, and I'm going to change it to 80. So I'm changing this value here that's at that index position 0 to 80. And if I printed that again after that, you'd see instead of printing 50 as it did there, it would print 80 out. So let that run. But see wonder what you'd think might happen if I tried to assign element 0 to a string. So again, this is about types. In the same way you can have types of variables, you can have types of arrays. If I said that an array is an array of integers, then it must be an array of integers. You can't have like one integer and then a string or a character or something. They have to all be the same type. By the way, when you get these like little underlined things that says there's an error in your replit, it's usually a problem with the website. And if I refresh that, the errors will go away. I know that my code is correct. If you know that your code is correct and Replit's saying it's wrong, trust your own intuition. Refresh it and see if the error is still there. Often it might not be. It might be your fault, but like, just give it a go. So if I said, instead of changing it to 80, you can see here that printout did it. It printed 50, 70. I changed it to 80. I printed it out again and it said 80. So if I said hello, I'm going to immediately get a syntax error. It says I can't convert a string to an int. This is an array of integers that you cannot put a string in. So make sure that you have the same type of variables in each thing. So that's a little introduction to initializing arrays, printing out different elements where arrays start, and then changing the data in an array at an element. At an index. And just to give you an example of another type of array you could have, we could have an array of strings. So I do string, and then I say names, and then I assign it some values. So my name, just make up a few names. These are strings, so they're contained within quotation marks. Elena, Sophie, etc. And then again, if I want to print that out to the console, console.writeLine, names, and then say if I wanted to print Steve out, that is going to be at index 1. You might have guessed that. So I put 1 in there. How would I print out Sophie? Pause the video and see if you can figure that out. That's right. You unpause me. You do console.writeLine 0, 1, 2, 3. What would happen if I put 4 here? Wonder what the error would be. Try that out and see what error you get in the console. And this is to do with the sizes of an array. See, an array is something that is set in memory of fixed size, usually. In a lot of modern programming languages, you can they can be adjustable sizes, but the original array was a set of variables of fixed size, so it has a specific start and end, and there's a certain chunk of memory that's set aside for that array. So if you try and go outside of the indexes, then you're going to an area that isn't inside of that array of variables. So you can see here, I'm printing those things out correctly. So if I did put a 4 here, I will get an index out of bounds error. And that is because there is only 0, 1, 2, 3, up to 3. Like that's the last index, 3. So 4 doesn't exist. And that's what you get, an index out of bounds error. So you must be very careful when you're using arrays not to go over the end of an array, and make sure that you stay within the number of indexes that are available in that array. One way we could protect against that, say you did want to print the very last element in the array and you weren't sure, well, let's just, if we take the array names, so I'm going to print out the length of the array, console.writeLine, and I'm going to do names.length. This will give me access to, it will count for me very quickly how many elements there are. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I put that into here like this, I will again get an index out of bounds error, because I'm actually getting 4. I'm saying that there are 4 things in here, but the last index is actually 3 because arrays start at 0. So how can I fix that? So using the names.length as the index inside of here, I want to print out the last name. How can I fix that so I don't get an index out of bounds error? Pause the video, see if you can do it. Well, I do that by taking 1 off it. So the length is 4, but if I take 1 off it, then I will get 3, which is the very last element in that array. And we give that a minute, and you'll see it printing out the length first, and then it will print out the very last element by using the length of this array, taking 1 off it, and that guarantees that we will never go over the end of it. So these are really important things to get your head around, like how to deal with arrays and not go out of bounds and change the data in them, and the different types of arrays you can have. And arrays really can, basically, when you become more advanced, they don't have to be strings or integers or doubles, but they can be very complex object types. They could be whole classes. You could have like an array of comment objects, and each comment object, say, consists of number of likes or the text or something, and that's when it becomes useful. Say for example, Amazon, like when you go on Amazon or Google and you do a search, like if I search on here and I search for cat, it's not Amazon or Google, but if I go Google cat, I get 87 billion results, 8,670,000,000 results about a cat, right? And what the server is kind of basically doing is it's going to the server and it's saying, give me some search objects back, and it will give them back to you in an array. And then it's looking through each element in this array and displaying these as results here. So arrays are and lists of things are a very common thing you see throughout, even through advanced programming. So that's all I'm going to do in this one, just a short explanation of creating arrays and changing in the data in them. Next video, I'm going to look at looping arrays.